Hello. Welcome into the Fantasy Life Show. We are so excited to have you here with us today because we not only have the one and only Thor Nystrom with us for the running back rankings that we're going to go through, but as you can see on your screen, we've got Dwain, McFarland, all tan, back from Cabo, ready to give us his breakdown of the running back supermodel. Dwain, welcome in. How's it going?
I am super excited to be here. Getting to hang out with you and Thor. Normally Producer Swing only lets me hang out with Ian, which Ian and I love each other. But, Swing's letting me out of the cage. Like, he's letting me come hang out with you guys. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. And, just got back from Cabo. Pretty fun, Kendall. Looked at the ocean. And, I think we should have a show there, right? I've got family that lives there, so maybe we should just do a show with me, you, and Thor where we film for like a week. I think Swing would be down for it because he would get to go.
No, I think so too. I mean, Thor, you're down to just go to Cabo. I think we'll all just be fine.
I'm 1,000% down. Someone's got to bring the suntan lotion for me though. I get burned very easily, but I'm there.
All right, there we go. Our next edition, when we do wide receivers or tight ends next, you'll see us in Cabo. So just wait on that for a little bit. I'm sure that'll go right through the budget. But it is Thor Thursday, so let's get into these running backs, guys. All right, so here we go. We're going through Thor's running back rankings. So just to let everyone know, Thor, we're going through your rankings first, and then we're going to compare them to the rookie supermodel with Dwain McFarland here. Those are all live at fantasylife.com. You can check them out 100% free. And it feels like, we're going to start easy here because Thor, Ashton Jeanty, your RB1, obviously Dwain, also your RB1. I mean, Thor, the way that you've described him on these last couple shows and throughout this whole process in the offseason is just like, Saquon Barkley is the next best guy that's come out since then. So what have you seen with Ashton Jeanty? It just feels like he's a lock to be a stud in the NFL.
Yeah, that process was over before it started because we don't need any more data on Ashton Jeanty to know that he is clearly the RB1 in this class. That you see some discussions out there of like, oh, is RB2 closer to RB1 than we thought? No, it's not. Ashton Jeanty is by far and away the dude in this class. You can argue about everyone after this. This is the one spot we're not arguing about.
Dwain, and for you, I mean, it's kind of the same process, but what did you see when you were going through the supermodel? You can talk about your comps and just everything, just how good Ashton Jeanty is going to be.
Yeah, it's just like Thor said. It's not close with the running back two, Omarion Hampton, who we'll talk about here in a minute. It is a definite tier where you've got Jeanty sitting alone. I actually just updated his expected draft capital because it's now sitting at 6 over on Mock Draft Central. So it looks like him going to the Raiders, like that's becoming a more of a theme. So I had him at 10 before I left, for vacation, get back Kendall, and he's actually moved up 4 spots. When I put that number in, he actually moves to a 91 overall in the supermodel, sitting at 89 right now. If you guys are looking on the screen, following along on YouTube, you can see the 89, but actually would be a 91, which would be the 4th best score ever in the supermodel, tied for 3rd with Christian McCaffrey. And so, I mean, if you look at the comps for him in the model, they're great. Even if we kept him at a grade of 89, it would still really be good. We got Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, and Jahmyr Gibbs are the only guys to get a grade of 85 or higher in the supermodel. So it's pretty much like Thor said. It's like home run city. You're going to be sitting really good with Ashton Jeanty.
Thor, if we had to pick a weakness, and I know it might be tough with someone like Ashton Jeanty, but what would you kind of point to? If someone just came up and asked you like, hey, okay, what's the one maybe con of Ashton Jeanty's game? What would you say?
No hedging on this one. Ashton, if you're watching, you're not great in pass pro. That's about it though. That's where it ends. Kid's a fabulous receiver. He would have been a collegiate D1 scholarship slot receiver if he hadn't switched positions. He was first team all district around where Dwain comes to us from in Frisco, taking over for Marvin Mims his junior year of high school. But obviously that his production as a running back speaks for itself. One of the hardest guys to tackle, just in terms of pure tackling, we have seen come out of college the last 25 years. This is a guy who averaged almost 5 yards per carry in college after contact. I mean, like it's prodigious video game type broken tackle numbers, yards after contact numbers. That's just as the runner, but as the receiver as well, you have a ton of utility there, both out of the backfield. You can also shift the guy into the slot. Again, that's a position he used to play in high school.
And then, Dwain, just to wrap it up with Jeanty, how much do you like the potential landing spot with the Raiders? It feels like the worst kept secret in the NFL. You've got quotes coming out from over there, but do you think that's where he can really thrive, especially in fantasy football?
He's so good. I really don't think it matters where he lands, as long as it's not like with another elite back, like which with how high he's going to go in the draft, that's probably not going to happen. So I think it really doesn't matter to me. But yes, the Raiders would be a great landing spot. Clearly, the runway is open. He would take over as the lead back. We would have Pete Carroll, who we know would be committed to the ground game, along with Chip Kelly. We've got Geno Smith in town there. So, yeah, I think that would be a great landing spot for him. And is like what Thor said. If you look at him in the passing game, like he was so good like the year before last. Last year, they just loaded him up on the ground. But the supermodel really does care about that receiving profile. And that's a big thing that did boost Genty up. If you look at him, he's got a 82nd percentile best RIPTA score. So that's best receiving yards per team attempt, which is one of the better scores in the history of the model. So like this is a guy that can do it in all phases of the game. If he landed somewhere, Kendall, where there's not like a loaded, room of receivers, tight ends, things like that, I think he could be like a 15-16% target share guy. He's not CMC Kamara level, but he's like the one notch down below that. But he's ahead of all the guys that we would really group into, okay, these guys can catch swing passes, check downs. He's a level above those guys, but just below CMC and Kamara as far as what the model thinks about him anyway as a receiver.
All right. Well, another running back that you guys actually both agree on, and I promise people we're going to get to some of these guys that you guys have very different opinions on, but it is Omarion Hampton. Thor, your RB2, Dwain in the rookie supermodel that you can see on your screen as well, RB2 for you as well. So, I mean, Thor, when you look at it, you've said that he reminds you of Duke McAllister. What have you seen in him to make him your RB2?
Yeah, in terms of the comparison with Deuce McAllister, you're talking very, very similar frames on those guys, very similar testing metrics and very similar running styles. You have a little bit of that upright runner thing with the well-fortified frame around 225 pounds. Hampton measured in at 221 at the combine, but plays a little bit closer to 225 like Deuce did. And the 40 and then the vertical with those guys, again, with that sort of upright running style. And once they can access their top speed, that's where you get the home run hitting ability from both those guys. But the body armor and the acceleration, both to get through the arm tackles at the line of scrimmage and then accelerate out there into the second and third level, that's sort of the calling card there. You get some of that home run hitting ability with the in between the tackles efficiency. And then there are limitations as a receiver, but it doesn't mean that he is not going to produce as a receiver in the NFL. This part of the evaluation, it more evokes a Leonard Fournette guy that wasn't used as a receiver at LSU, but the dump offs, the screens, and the swings, those were the things that he could do. And of course, you get the yards after the catch there. That's the sort of stuff that Hampton does. You just get him the ball in space with an envoy in front of him. That's where he's a problem.
I mean, Dwain, only below average in the passing game, but you really said that the weaknesses when you look at Omarion Hampton, like there's no glaring weaknesses really there, especially when you look at the supermodel.
Yeah, he's really solid, like across all the buckets. Like he doesn't have like a calling card where it's like he has this elite trait, but really good across multiple buckets and good enough in others. So the model agrees with Thor, like not great as a receiver, but good enough. And I thought Thor did a great job in his write-up talking about his niche skill set behind the line of scrimmage. And let's be honest, most guys that are coming out of college, Kendall, like we probably make too big of a deal about how good they are as just actually being able to catch the ball. Most guys can catch swing passes, stuff behind the line of scrimmage. A lot of times it will come down to what kind of team they land on. Are they on a team where you've got two good wide receivers and a tight end? If that happens to Omarion Hampton, like he's going to be an 8-9% target share guy. But he is capable, if he landed on a team that really only had one other good pass catcher, of being like a 12% player. So he's not one of these guys where you have to worry that I think he gets to the NFL and he's a complete dud in the passing game. I could see him having to give up the passing down duties if he lands on a team that just has a really good, passing down back. Like that could be a challenge. Whereas I don't think that would matter for Genty. He's just going to take over all the roles immediately wherever he lands. But still a really good prospect. And kind of like if you look at it from a supermodel standpoint, 77% of players that have rated in his range in the supermodel since 2017 have posted a top 24 running back finish within their first 3 seasons. 62% of them have gone on to post a top 12 running back. So we're talking about a guy that's probably more of a low end running back one once all things settle out. May not quite hit that in his rookie year, depending on where he lands, but the potential is certainly there. So Supermodel really likes Mr. Omarion Hampton.
I was going to say, I liked the closest comps in the model that you had written out: Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Rashad Penny, Nick Chubb, Zach Charbonnet. So before we move on to the next guy, Thor, what about, I've seen a few mocks recently with Omarion Hampton going over to the Denver Broncos. Is that a fit that you would like? Like, hey, Ashton Genty's off the board, Chicago goes somewhere else. If the Broncos take him, do you like that fit?
They think it's a fit. If Omarion Hampton is on the board at 20, I think Omarion Hampton is headed to Denver. The question is, does he get there? But yeah, Denver is not hiding their tracks too much on this one. Mm-hmm. Sean Payton's not a great actor as is. Denver loves Omarion Hampton. So if he is there, we'll have to see if some team, ahead of them, or a potential trade. The Chargers and Jim Harbaugh, they also like Omarion Hampton. And there's other teams, but Chargers sitting at 22. A couple of those other teams in the 20s, could they hop them? You get to 18, 19 there. People know that Denver loves Hampton. So, I think that's what it's going to come down to.
All right, we're going into our third guy here in the running back rankings. We're going to do a dynasty deep dive, though, on Kaleb Johnson here, presented by DraftKings. I don't know, Dwain, did that remind you of Cabo? Did you get flashbacks to the beach? Like, that could be us with the dynasty deep dive presented by DraftKings.
Yeah,
could be us just on the beach. What are we doing here?
I'm with you. I love hanging out with you guys, but when I hear that music, I kind of wish I was still just in Cabo, hanging out by the pool. But again, we'll get us all there for a show.
Perfect. This is where we start to, have not a huge difference, Dwain, but when we look at this is RB. Talking about Kaleb Johnson in the Dynasty Deep Dive presented by DraftKings. RB3 for him, RB5 in the rookie supermodel. So, Dwain, I kind of want to start with you and see, what traits you saw in Kaleb Johnson and what he could bring to the NFL that could help dynasty managers in 2025.
Yeah, and so the one thing I would say, and it'll be interesting because I want to hear, Thor's thoughts. Like when I look at this, really, Judkins, Johnson, Trevion Henderson, they're all really close in the model. Like they're not very far apart when you look at their supermodel rating. So really, I try not to get too hung up in guys that might be 1 point above or below each other. Ultimately, the reason I created the supermodel was to try to help people understand ranges of outcomes. And then you could use that based on what the market is doing to say, well, wow, the market's undervaluing player 4, right, out of this group of guys. So it really comes down to, when we talk about pure rankings, yes, Thor has him higher than what the supermodel is. But if Thor actually believes that, Kaleb Johnson is really similar to Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson, and he could see those guys all having similar outcomes, then there's really not a difference between the two. But if he thinks that there's a tier break there, that's where the supermodel would feel differently. It feels like Kaleb Johnson really just belongs in a group with Trevion Henderson, as well as, a couple of other guys, including Quinshon Judkins. So as far as like the strengths, I think Thor did a good job in his write-up, so I'll let him outline some of those things. But overall, like when you just look at him in the model, Kendall, like he grades out fine across multiple things, but he doesn't have like any really elite traits. And so for folks that aren't familiar with the supermodel, just really quick, production rating is really just based on their yards per team attempt, and it's adjusted for their career, which I look at their strength of schedule, their teammates, all these other things, because we have to try to normalize the data. You play on a run-heavy team versus a non-run-heavy team. You play with other really good teammates, and that's the thing with Kaleb Johnson. He didn't really break out until later, but there were some coaching things and issues going on, and once he was given his opportunity, he really did well. And then the film rating I use, and I'm trying to really pressure Thor into us working together to use his stuff for the film rating. But right now we're using Lance Zierlein because we have the data that we can test going back a long way for him from NFL.com. So basically Thor and Lance are just slightly different on how they feel about Kaleb Johnson. So Lance Zierlein right now has Kaleb Johnson at his running back 7. So that's pulling him down a little bit in the model versus where Thor has him. But that's the difference with what's happening between these two spots.
Yeah, as far as the discrepancy that you're, in the tiers of this running back class that Dwain was talking about, I'll put it this way. There will be a bigger gap in my overall board ranking of Ashton Genty, RB1, and then RB2, then Hampton. Then there will be a gap between Hampton, RB2, and RB5 on my list, who is Judkins. There will be a bigger gap between Genty and Hampton than those other, what is it, 4 guys there. Mm-hmm. I have, and I include Hampton in this. Hampton and then those next 3 guys, Kaleb Johnson and the 2 Ohio State guys. those guys, that's the second tier for me. Dwain was talking about the scheme there. Tim Lester, the former offensive, he had been the offensive assistant with the Packers the year before, former head coach of Western Michigan. He took over as Iowa's offensive coordinator last year, and they added the mid-zone concept to what was already zone running concept, but under Brian Ferentz, it was more binary. You'd either do the inside or the wide. More elements were added with Tim Lester, and you sort of keep the defense off the beat of your scent. If he is indeed Kaleb Johnson going to his zone team, that's where RB3 with a bullet for me, and maybe even you have the argument at RB2 against Omari and Hampton. This becomes more of an issue or the idea of ranking boards without having a team, doing it in a vacuum. Omari and Hampton, the reason that I had to go with him a little bit above Kaleb Johnson is he is scheme versatile. Omari and Hampton could play in a gap scheme, no problem. Could play in a zone scheme as well. There was a lot of zone stuff at North Carolina. Kaleb Johnson must go into his own scheme. Kaleb Johnson cannot play in a gap scheme, but Kaleb Johnson, one of those guys who his game fits so well for particularly the wide zone stuff, but he was one of the best running backs this year, for instance, on the inside zone concept, showed to be very good at the mid zone as well. But Kaleb Johnson, the knock on him and his evaluation, it's the 4.57 on the 40, but it's really interesting. You look into that. He was only 7th percentile in 10-yard, the 10-yard split Kaleb Johnson was during his run, but his high-end speed was one of the highest of the entire running back class during that run. It was 22 miles per hour, which happened to be the same top speed that we had gotten from Iowa's GPS on the field. This is a guy that needs a little bit of a runway to get to top speed, but because of the way that he does his outside zone running, where he is manipulating those linebackers down the line of, you have to pick the gap before I declare mine, that is how he ends up running through more open holes than analogous outside zone running backs, and it gives him the runway that he needs to access that high-end speed. And once he's there, you got a real problem. He's probably not stopping until he has crossed the end zone line.
So Dwain, with this dynasty, spin on Kaleb Johnson, you wrote him that he profiles low end RB2, shot at RB1 upside. So what kind of team, or like Thor just said, where does he fit the best? Where for dynasty managers, you say, yeah, you want to spend this pick on him in 2025.
Yeah, so like when I look at him, the other thing that there is a little bit of a concern with him in the model is really what he did in the pass game. He was 38th percentile for his best receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is the receiving component that goes into the model. If you look at his PFF career receiving grade, it was 62.5. That's 44th percentile. So there's a little bit of a concern there too, right? He could land in a spot. And there's also outlined by Thor as well as Lance Zierlein concerns about him as a pass blocker. So I could see early in his career being more of an early down back only because he might not be trusted on 3rd and 4th downs or long down and distance situations. And it could also be a situation where if he lands on a team that has a good passing down back, they're going to want to have that player out there. However, Zierlein and Thor both outlined that they do think he's got hands, like he's capable of catching the ball, kind of like what we talked about with Omari and Hampton. If you're going to check the ball down, like he can do all of those things. It's just not, I'm not sure though. I feel like there's just like Thor's talking about with the scheme versatility could be an issue. I think the other concern could be like his ability in pass pro as well as his ability as a receiver out of the backfield. Like it could still come on. Like I'll say this, there are guys that weren't great receivers in college that do get to the NFL and they're just fine. They usually don't turn into elite guys suddenly in the NFL. If they're really good receivers at running back, they usually already showed it in college. But there's a lot of guys that can survive in that range. So landing spot probably matters more for him because of those things. So Thor, interesting in your thoughts on that though. Like, if you see certain traits in players that you're like, if they don't have this, they're never going to get it. Because I do ask that about the run blocking stuff as well. Most of the guys tend to pick it up like as their career goes on. So if you're just thinking best ball this year, landing spot probably matters a lot. But if you're thinking dynasty, in my opinion, not as much. I haven't seen the data really show that just because you were not a good pass blocker in college, it means that you have no chance in the NFL.
Yeah, and you get a little bit of that receiving utility, on the dump downs, or the check downs, the screens, the swings. But yeah, we just haven't seen them out there, we have a very small sample size with the pass blocking. I mean, for Kaleb Johnson, keep in mind, Iowa was one of the worst passing teams in the FBS over the time where we saw him on the field. They were just awful with that. And so that, this past season is when he got the bigger target share and volume share of their passing offense with those checkdowns and dump downs. But I believe his ADOT last season was minus 3.0, but then I think he averaged, it was 11 or 12 yards after the catch, right? So it was just, hey, Kaleb, manufacture this stuff for us. But yeah, as far as the offensive fits, what you're looking at, of course, the Packers. I mean, he literally ran in the Packers running scheme last year. It's what Tim Lester installed there. And you're doing it against, some of the nastiest run defenses in the nation. In the Big Ten, of course, the SEC would be the other one. But Packers, 49ers, Rams, Vikings, I'm forgetting off the top of my head like 4 of the other ideal fits, but you have that bucket there where they run essentially the exact same thing. And so if any of those teams ended up accessing him, that's what he's looking for. And by the way, watch out for the 49ers to take a running back higher than everybody thinks. The Jordan Mason thing tipped people off about this. Kyle Shanahan is well aware of how good this running back class is. And when I say earlier than people think, watch out for the 49ers in round 1. I think Kyle Shanahan is sniffing around a potential move up to get a singular offensive skill star, whether that be Genty. They play positionless football there. That's how, like, the idea of McCaffrey there, you can have Genty out wide. You can have McCaffrey in the slot. I mean, you can do all this stuff. The other one, though, is Tyler Warren. But if indeed that happens, the 49ers don't go running back really early, day 2, could almost bet them on salary on that one. They're gonna be popping a running back fairly early.
Oh, I like that. All right, that was Kaleb Johnson doing the Dynasty Deep Dive presented by DraftKings. All right, basketball fans, we've seen some incredible action on the court as we head into the heart of the NBA season. The games are getting even more intense, and with so many high-stakes matchups ahead, you won't want to miss out. Right now, you can get in on the action with my partners at DraftKings Pick 6, a fresh, exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All new customers who play just $5 will get $50 in Pick 6 credits to keep you in the game. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and sign up with code FANTASYLIFE to claim your offer. This is your shot to level up your NBA experience only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. All right, let's keep going here, guys. Going over to Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. Thor, he is your running back 4, and in the supermodel, actually, Dwain, do I see running back 3? You're kind of liking Travion Henderson here. I know that you've written, similar to Omari and Hampton, there aren't elite aspects maybe to Henderson's profile, but he's giving you really good scores in all of your supermodels, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and he just broke out really early in college, right? Yeah. He's a 5-star prospect, and the model likes that about him. Now, he obviously battled some injuries the next 2 seasons, and then in his final season, you get Quinshon Judkins, coming over from Ole Miss, so it got a little bit more crowded. But if you do squint and you look at that freshman season when he was fully healthy, here are the players, Kendall, whenever we look at it. In their first year, they were able to post a 2.0 adjusted yards per attempt, which doubles your receiving yards versus your rushing yards, because we care about that for fantasy, and that's got the strongest signal to future production. But this is the list back to 2017. I know, don't laugh at the first one. Deuce Vaughn, sorry Cowboys fans, 2.58. But then it's Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley. So that's pretty elite company very early in the career for Travion Henderson. The question is, like, the fall off, how much of that was due to the injuries over the next 2 seasons, and then the arrival of Quinshon Judkins, who is also a guy that's expected to go, in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. So people also like him. So that holds him back a little bit, his overall career production, but that really early breakout is a very good thing for him in the model. The other fact is that he played at Ohio State. So whenever you look at his program quality rating, it's really high. The way that gets calculated, you look at the program quality index, looking over at ESPN, we use their score. And if where a player played, right, because all the transfers we have to account for, it essentially looks at that score, and then it puts it together for the course of their career. And if you play on a really loaded team, that probably recruited really well, it goes into the model because it's harder to get snaps and to actually get opportunities on teams like that than it is on others. So and there's just a lot of things to like about him. Again, like you said, there's not like one single elite trait. But obviously, like when you read the scouting profile and things like that, Lance Zierlein really likes him, sees him as an explosive playmaker. You could see him landing somewhere where he gets used like an A-Chan or something like that. I think there's a lot to like. The model does like him over Kaleb Johnson. A lot of that, though, is like he's expected to go 20 picks ahead of Kaleb Johnson. So that's also in the model.
I mean, Thor, we've talked about him a lot, 4.43 40 at the combine. We talked about his relative athletic score, 9.43. So I know you still, even though we've said, there's a bit of a difference between these two and how you guys rank them, it's still relatively close. You still really like TreVeyon Henderson.
Yeah, and I think Dwain and I are probably pretty close, on him, just one spot off, but I think we see him pretty similar. This is a guy who probably should be paired with an early down meat and potatoes guy just to take that work away from TreVeyon. TreVeyon, it's a weird sort of evaluation because there are elements that are sort of discrepancies against what you think that player type should be. And number one is he's this airback who's really good on the passing downs, and he has that elite athleticism. Typically, we think of those guys as sort of finesse type players. TreVeyon Henderson is not a finesse player at all. He loves to scrap. He's one of those guys who will accelerate into contact when he has the ball. He is also a guy who is looking for a fight, both in pass blocking, but also, as I pointed out, in run blocking as well. The Chip Kelly system, they love. Sometimes they'd have the two running backs out there. They would do a fake, and then they would have Will Howard leaking out the other way. Well, the lead blocker was TreVeyon Henderson because he's going to go and knock the head off of a linebacker. It's who Will Howard wanted to run behind because of this element of his game where you have a guy who is always moving at high speeds without any regard for his body and getting into these car collisions on the field. That's why you have to take away some of those things from him so that he's not taking the damage that we saw him take his freshman year when he was the bell cow to the point of Dwain. Day one on campus, pal, you're the guy. They did that with him his freshman year. They wanted to do it with him his sophomore year. It's just he ended up breaking down. When you had Quinshon Judkins doing the meat and potato stuff and taking some of that usage and some of that damage away from him, that's why TreVeyon Henderson was able to play 16 games last year. Hopefully he can get into a similar situation in the NFL, and that's where the explosive element of his game is going to play up, and he's going to reward his fantasy owners.
Dwain, we've talked a lot about. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't. So,
yeah,
how much does that really matter to you? Like, because sometimes I worry we overrate our ability to understand, like, really how much a player will play at the next level. Like, we've run into it with Jahmyr Gibbs, we've run into it with Bucky Irving, we've run into it with all these guys, and ultimately, if guys get on the field and they really just start making plays, a lot of times the coaches just don't care anymore, and they're like, you know what? We're just going to get you out there 60% of the time because you know what, you're too valuable to the team. You could hit a home run at any moment. So I do wonder like how much like we should care and how predictive that really is, because I've just seen too many backs that had part-time roles in college and they turn into full-time backs in the NFL. And the other thing that does happen in college, it's more of a rotation in college. College just rotate running backs way more than what the NFL does, even though the NFL's turned into more of a rotational back system over the last 10, 15 years. It's still not to the level college because they've also got to keep these other guys happy, right? They're the recruits and they got to give them playing time. Lots of factors in college you have to worry about. But I'm just asking, like, how much do you think that really matters? And what would you say you would see the ceiling being? Do you think he could be in an H-N type role? Because H-N's playing 55, 60% of the snaps. And man, that can be a running back one in fantasy when you're that explosive.
I think that's the great call there, Dwain. The thing that you take away that's categorically impossible for him, I think, is 300 plus touches in a season. However, you can make the argument the other way of cutting his touches down to the odd chain range, right? Where it's 12 to 16 per game, roughly in there. You greatly increase the odds that not only that you're going to have him for closer to a 17 game slate, which fantasy owners are interested in, you're also juicing the odds of the performance that you're going to get with each touch. Right. I mean, when the Ferrari all of a sudden has air coming out of one of the wheels, it tends to not be quite as explosive. Same correlation here. And so the same sort of care that the Dolphins take with Achane's usage, and we're going to be smart about this, and then we're going to try to get him into space on those 12 to 16 when we do and give ourselves the best shot that we can at a dinger, that you're going to see the same stuff with TreVeyon Henderson. Yeah, for me, it's not a huge thing with his fantasy utility.
All right, let's move on now to Quinshon Judkins here. We're going rookie supermodel rating, actually RB4. Thor, he is your RB5 heading into the NFL draft. So, Dwain, I'll start with you on this one because he really, when everyone goes to check out the rookie supermodel articles, you guys can find those at fantasylife.com 100% free. He is at the top of the tier 3 RB2 prospects. So, what did you see in his game when you were doing this model?
Yeah, I've got him right there with Kaleb Johnson. They're in the same tier. But when you look at Judkins, like he's got the early down thing. He's got that. Like he can play the early downs right away. I think the question really is passing downs. What's he going to be capable of as far as what he can do as a receiver in the NFL? So 18th percentile best receiving yards per team pass attempt season, Kendall, at 0.38. That's not good. Best target share season was 7%, and then his career PFF receiving grade 41st percentile at 64.1. So that's the thing that could limit him. So I'm really interested, Thor, in hearing your thoughts on, like, is this really another guy that we should think of similar to Kaleb Johnson, even Omari and Hampton in that range, that like he can do this. He's not going to be a Kamara, CMC. You're not going to confuse him with one of those guys. Or do you see him a notch below those players in the receiving game? Because that's the biggest concern in the model. He can do the early down stuff.
Yeah, for me, yeah, he certainly the early down stuff. He is tremendous at that. I think you do get a similar type of the receiving utility as we talked about with the previous two guys. Perhaps not quite as good as far as the breaking the tackles and some of that home run hitting ability as those other two guys when they get out in space. Although he did impress us greatly, Quinshon Judkins did with his testing. He tested a little bit better than I thought. The pass pro is a little bit behind for Quinshon as well, and that's why I thought last season at Ohio State when you had Travion taking that stuff from him, but you had Quinshon doing all that meat and potato stuff and the between the tackle stuff. Love that kid's feel, Quinshon's feel. I love his vision. The between the tackles, his little micro cuts. He's always like changing the picture on the defender when he's on the doorstep. Like, so it helps you turn flush tackle attempts into off angle attempts that he can then run through. That stuff really, really good. But I wonder is there a point of demarcation here where it just is better for Quinshon to be on a team where you have that full-time receiving guy and for some of this other usage like there was at Ohio State? That's what I'm sort of curious about. But to your point, yeah, he can absolutely catch the ball. Similar concepts, check down swings and screens.
Thor, really quickly here, because we talked about how deep this running back class is, but when we get into your RB5, this is the territory we're at with Quinshon Judkins. Are we more for fantasy football managers in that high end RB2 range, or is there upside with Judkins to be an RB1 depending on his landing spot?
I think it would have to be circumstance with him, because to do that, you're going to have to get into a situation where they don't have that receiving back, or the circumstance where potentially that guy's injured for a stretch of games. I happen to not think that Judkins is going to get the bell cow usage as a receiver. He certainly, wherever he goes, you're picking him explicitly under the auspices of the idea that he will be that for you as a runner right away. I think that the difference for me would just be he's not going to get as many catches. But yeah, RB2 right away sounds fair to me.
All right, now we're getting into a little bit of the drama here with the running back rankings, because we're going over to Devin Neal, and this is where you guys really start to pull apart a little bit. So, Thor, I will start with you on this one. He is your RB6, and then for Dwain in the supermodel, all the way down at RB11. So I do want to know where the differences that you guys see, what the differences are that you guys see in his game, what makes this to be a prospect that's a little bit farther apart. But what have you seen in Devin Neal, Thor, that makes him, a little bit higher on your list?
Well, you don't see backs like this that are 220 plus pounds that have feet like this. That's what it is. He has amazing, violent feet and precise footwork. He's always making people miss, even when it doesn't show up in the broken tackle metrics. He's one of those guys that will make you whiff on the doorstep where you don't even touch him. There was reps where because of a cut he made, you had the defender who was oncoming this way, wiping out the defender who was trailing him. So, I mean, he would cause these sort of Keystone Cop-like crashes where he was he's out in open space. Bye-bye. The discrepancy between me and Dwain, I would have to assume, it's twofold. I would assume there's a bit of it is the college. I can't believe there would be any downgrade for the institution of Kansas University in Dwain's metrics. But the other one would be the receiving utility. In college, Devin Neal was used as a receiver, not too dissimilarly to the way that the guys we just talked about, Omarion Hampton, Kaleb Johnson, and Quinshon Judkins, the screens, the checkdowns, the swings. My supposition, and I have seen this, so I have supporting evidence on this, is Devin Neal is a receiving guy who can be a threat down the field beyond the line of scrimmage, that he can run closer to the full gamut of routes that you see with a guy like Alvin Kamara, where he is breaking ankles out there past the line of scrimmage, creating his own opportunities without the ball. That is something that those three aforementioned guys cannot do. They can create after they have the ball, but Devin Neal, I think, can create beforehand. The constitution of the Kansas offense, because they had three starting senior wide receivers, long-term starters there, and also one at tight end. They had the veterans there. Their passing concepts were designed to go down the field to those veterans, whereas Devin Neal would function as the checkdown guy. That was just the constitution of that thing. When we were down at the Senior Bowl, me and some others had that supposition of, because of that footwork, because of the brief flashes we saw when they allowed Devin Neal to go down the field, that he would be able to create separation at will, essentially. That is exactly what we saw in Mobile. I think this guy is going to be a way, way better receiver in the NFL than we saw in college, and it was just because of the usage.
Yeah, I mean, so you're right. Like the receiving yards per team pass attempt, like the best season for him was 42nd percentile. So that is holding him down a little bit in the model. But really the biggest thing is the draft capital, and it's falling. Like, so when the mock draft season started, he was sitting around pick 100. He's now sitting at pick 149, which I haven't even updated in the model. So that's going to move him down further if I do that. Lance Zierlein also had a grade of 6.1 on him, which is the 43rd percentile. So the film component right now that Devin Neal's getting, again, not terrible, but below average. And so that's really pushing him down the board as far as the supermodel goes. Like you said, Kendall, the running back 11 in the model versus running back 6 for Thor. But let's be honest, like, I think we all know, like, the number one reason that Devin Neal actually grades way higher for Thor. Now, Thor, don't move your camera again, like, and freeze it like you did in pre-show, but just, you can just say Rock Chalk Jayhawk right now. Like, I think you could just, like, throw that out there.
Rock Chalk Jayhawk.
I feel like we need that on your articles, Thor, to just be like, hey, by the way, just Kansas
disclaimer
guy through and through. So that's a disclaimer that we need. Let me ask you, Thor, because I know you've been talking about system fits, but what's the best system you think that he would fit in to make him an even, to make him go past his ADP to be a little bit better, especially for fantasy football?
I think this guy is scheme versatile. And we saw both elements at Kansas. It's not as skewed one way or the other. I think his skill set ends up fitting both. And the guy I ended up comping him to is, you guys remember Jay Ajayi, durable Jay Ajayi, right? If Jay Ajayi had never had the knee issues, what could his career have ended up looking like? I think we're about to find out with Devin Neal.
All right, let's
Kendall,
go
I'll
over
say real
to
quick,
our,
this is one where the model is, like, definitely different. So, like, if you look at where, Neal falls historically in the model, only 5% of his comps have gone on to be top 12 finishers. The guys that we talked about in the previous group were in the 30% range. If you look at the guys that have gone on to be top 24, 21% for the guys in Neal's range, and for the other group, it was in the 50%. So it is a clear tier. It is a clear tier break. And just, again, the model's just looking at the data, right? And so Thor and I are going to work. We're going to figure out, like, how do we figure out how to get his film ratings into the supermodel at some point in the future. And we'll have, and then I'll obviously have to have something that downgrades players that are from Kansas.
Obviously, we'll work that out when we're all in Cabo. That'll be
because
something,
we know Thor's
in Cabo. That's it.
That's right. We'll work that out in Cabo. So then, Dwain, is it the same when we look at RJ Harvey? Because this is another guy that we're going to talk about here, where he is your RB12 for Thor, RB7. So I'm curious for you, Dwain, in the supermodel, what you saw from him, and see if we can compare it to what Thor has seen in his film.
This one really comes down to Zierlein versus Thor. We would have to get Lance Zierlein on the show, but I'm looking at Zierlein right now. He's sitting at right now, what number? Oh man, it's like past 15. I still haven't seen his name yet. So where Thor has him, and what I'm using right now for film grades for the model, and Lance Zierlein's, just to be clear, guys, like, his film grades have been really good. I've tested them back to 2014. They correlate stronger than any production metric to future fantasy production, that I have in the model. So zero, and he's really been good with running back. So, but it's a difference, right, between what Thor is seeing here and then what we're seeing from Zero Line. From a production standpoint, Kendall, from some of the other things, like it's not necessarily bad, for Harvey. It's mostly the film grade that's holding him down.
I mean, Thor, it sounds like we got to get your film. I mean, love Zerline and stuff, but let's get it together here. What have you seen that? I'm curious with RJ Harvey, what have you seen that makes such a big difference?
Dwayne's trying to set up a cage match between me and my boy Zerline. I do love Zerline. Yeah, he and I don't always see the players the same way, but I obviously respect his work a lot. With RJ Harvey, I would guess that with Lance and some other folks, it's the elevated age. And a later breakout, and then a bit of a smaller player as well. And I know with some film guys with RJ Harvey, there's the idea of, did he get too much of his production by bouncing inside run concepts? Because he did get a chunk from that in ways that won't be viable in the NFL, right? You can't just get flat down the line and then, oh yeah, I can outrun the outside linebackers. You can't do that every single time. My thing with him is I can explain, at least in my own head, the late breakout and then also the age, which is, this kid showed up to Virginia as this pint-sized dual threat quarterback. RJ Harvey was going to play quarterback out of high school, even though the kid even now is 5'8", flat, 206. So, that was initially. After 1 year, that's when he went to UCF, and he had some injuries early in his career, as a scout team practice guy, as he was transitioning to this new position. And that's why he didn't end up breaking out till the last 2 years. But I really like his game. He sees the field like a quarterback does, both as a receiver, also as a runner. He denotes the danger really quickly. He's going to have to modulate this a bit, though, because you would see him. He would notice that the dude crashing through the line really quick. That's when he would do his flatten out thing. But I don't think this is a bounce-heavy guy who can't fit his game to the NFL, because I actually like the work that we've seen with RJ Harvey between the tackles. He has that bowling ball type frame, and he's really darty between the tackles. You have that vision, then you have the dartiness. So he can get lateral and then get forward really, really quick. And then the home run speed. This kid's a home run hitter. He ran a 4.4 flat. He thought he was going to run in the high 4.3. So I know it kind of ticked off RJ that it was the 4.4 flat. And then the other thing, I think there is dormant potential as a receiver, which I talked to him about in Mobile. RJ was telling me they didn't use me as a receiver, totally out there down the field like I think I could have been used. And I was telling him, I agree with you, but did you know you're one of only two guys in this class, 1.5 yards per route run or more each of the last 2 years? And RJ Harvey was like, really? And I was like, yeah, but there is potential there as a receiver left to untap that wouldn't be in the data right now. So again, that's sort of a supposition that I'm making for him, same as I'm doing for Devin Neal.
I mean, Dwayne, I think you guys need to be working together a little bit more closely just so we could get the adjectives that Thor uses to describe some of these players. The vocabulary is fantastic. Like, you have to agree with that, Dwayne. It's I never know what Thor's going to say. Then he comes with bouncy and like sprinty and I'm just like, this is fantastic.
Whimsical. Yeah, whimsical was pre-show. Like, I can't believe he hasn't dropped whimsical yet. Yeah.
It's coming.
Thor,
it's coming.
Thor
Maybe it's coming.
he's a master of the vocabulary for sure.
Maybe it's going to happen here with DJ Giddens. Maybe you could say that he's whimsical here, Thor, because when we're looking at him, he is your RB8 coming in, and we're getting a little bit closer now compared to the last two guys, but RB9 in the supermodel. So curious, Thor, when you look at him and what you see and what Dwayne's seen in the supermodel, what you like in his skill set.
I like the athletic package. In the frame that we have here, you're talking 6 foot 212 into the combine, 98th percentile size adjusted athlete with that speed, low 4.4s. That opened some people's eyes on the field. I think he didn't get the credit that he deserved coming into the process for the athlete that he is, because when you see DJ Giddens play the game, the word in your head, it's more smooth operator than it is explosive. He's one of those guys who was just so under control, and all the movements seem to go in conjunction with one one another, just smooth. He's a glider. With the long steps and everything, he runs a little bit upright. It reminds me a bit of Zach Charbonnet. It's the same thing where you have the bigger back, but he's just so smooth. He has that high vantage point, has pretty good vision. The thing with DJ Giddens, I think that will decide, is he a little bit better than Dwain and I have him, or is he a little bit worse? It's going to be the receiving utility. We saw him do very interesting things at Kansas State where they'd shift him out to the boundary. They'd even shift him out to the slot as well. And then they'd run like the drag routes or the slant routes. Nothing crazy, right? But like the things where it's like, we can clear out some space for you and the quarterback hits you on the hands and then lead you into space. We saw cool stuff with that, but we also saw DJ Giddens flub some balls, flub some freebies. And so he needs to get better with the ball skills. You'll see him fight the ball sometimes, even on those freebies. Can he get better at that? The thing he can't do, this kid's a bad pass blocker. It's the one sort of do not have him out there pass blocking on his evaluation. The other stuff, though, love him as a runner, and I think that there is more potential as a receiver if we can work on those ball skills.
Yeah, his overall production rating is pretty good. It's a 75. The model is on a scale of 50-100, so he's right there around the middle, which is not bad. And then whenever you look at his ability in the passing game, like Thor said, there were definitely some things like with alignment and stuff, but still his best receiving yards per team pass attempt was in the 37th percentile, so not necessarily great. Maybe some of that does come down to their distrust of the hands. I'm not quite sure. But the big discrepancy again here is really ultimately just where he's projected to go in the draft, which right now I've got him at pick 115. So that's pushing him down a little bit in the model. And then if you look at Lance Zierlein's film grade on him, he's got him in the 36th percentile. So these guys, like you said, they're getting close. And so for me, there's a tier here where Devin Neal, RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens, some of these other guys we're going to talk about, they all fit together in one group. And it's like, a couple of them are probably going to end up being okay for fantasy, but a lot of them are not going to be. They're just in that range where it's really hard to say which is going to be which. And this is where a landing spot really does start to matter. And luck. Like, do you get a break like what Thor talked about earlier? Oh, does the passing down back get hurt? Does the starter get hurt? Just different things that sometimes open a door. And once a player's matured, they can step through that door. That's probably what we're talking about with DJ Giddens.
Heading over to Damian Martinez, RB9 for Thor. A little bit of a difference here in the supermodel, though, coming in at RB14 for Martinez. So, Dwain, I'll start with you on him because, to be totally honest, there was no summary. There was not a big write-up for Damian Martinez. So I want to start with you to just see, because Thor, of course, just has, 18 paragraphs on Martinez. But what did you see that made him your RB14?
Well, number one, I want to say that Matt Waldman also loves Damian Martinez. So that's another film person that I really respect, like I do Thor. So that really does bode well for Martinez. The other thing I'm going to say about Martinez, whenever I made this, Kendall, I want to say his mock draft position was sitting around like 160, maybe 170. Now he's sitting at 117. So this is a guy that's really climbing up the boards. So I need to update the supermodel. That's the easiest thing I need to say is, like, with this draft capital moving closer to where we have DJ Giddens, he's going to move up a tier in the model. So this is one of the biggest risers that we have. Like, this is 50 spots in the last 3 weeks since I wrote the supermodel article. So this is just, I need to go update the model on the site, Kendall, and it's going to be a lot closer to Thor. So let's let Thor actually tell us about the player.
There we go.
Yeah, this is a workman-like physical back who also has his tap dancer shoes on. It's the dichotomy of the hammer and the feet, right? Like, and it's similar to what I was talking about with Devin Neal, where you have the 220-pound plus back. You have some physicality there, but they're really, really good feet. And it's the same thing with Damian Martinez. The reason I have Damian just a slightly beneath Devin Neal, the receiving thing, and my projection of that to the next level. Damian Martinez, didn't get to see him as much on the passing downs in college, and I think that's probably what it's going to be in the NFL, where Damian Martinez is your early down type of a guy, and then you have your passing down guy, like probably like the Vikings this season are going to have Jordan Mason. That would be the Damian Martinez role, and then you'll need someone else to play the Aaron Jones role. But for what he is, Damian Martinez, very, very good. The PFF grades were tremendous every single season. the per carry, the yards after contact, all that stuff. And this is a kid who played in 2 different systems, got on the field early at Oregon State. That was more the downhill gap type, pro style type running system. Last year at Miami, he goes down there and it was Shannon Dawson's modified air raid. You had a minimum 3 receivers out wide every single time, sometimes the 4 where you just had the single back with Martinez. He got to face the thinner boxes, but of course not as much help lead blocking. So you got to see a little bit more with more space to work with. How did his vision play? How did his feet play? They played up as well. I like Damian Martinez's game.
So I updated the draft capital, Kendall, for Damian Martinez, and he does move up next to DJ Giddens. He moves up to a 68 overall. So I had him, it was 155 when I did it, and now it's a 117. So that's definitely one of the biggest climbers.
Big jump. That's a big jump. Let's go over to the RB1 in the people's hearts. That's Cam Skattebo here. And Thor, I mean, we have to have a conversation here because Dwain actually likes Skattebo more than you. And so I feel like we need to maybe have a heart-to-heart and see if we can fix that here. But I do want to, you and I have talked about him a lot. So what do you see in Skattebo? He is your RB10, and then in the supermodel, the RB6 coming into this draft.
Yeah, Skattebo, he's the all-time bowling ball type build. And then it's like when you spin the bowling ball, right? Because he with him, it's the movement as well. And I don't think he gets the credit for the agility, the short area agility that he has, the lateral agility. Now you see me, now you don't. And of course, he'll brawl with you. But I think there's, too much is talked about that brawling aspect. You don't give him credit for the feet. Those are the 2 things that he has. And that's what explains the, his after contact numbers, the broken tackle numbers. He was number 2, a distant number 2, but number 2 nonetheless, of course, behind Ashton Genty. But, you sort of had that second group, and Skattebo stood above the rest there. Guy who can handle heavy usage. As you know, Kendall, I mean, Arizona State's offense was just get the ball to Cam, get the ball to Cam, get the ball to Cam, right? Both as the runner, but also as the receiver. That team only had one other receiver that they trusted, Jordan Tyson. So outside of that, it was just chuck the ball to Cam whenever Jordan's covered or whatever. Can handle the heavy usage. This is a guy who reminds me quite a bit of David Montgomery. He had the same nitpicks on Montgomery coming out. Oh, he's not as good of an athlete. He's not going to be able to do the same stuff that he was doing at Iowa State. He's doing the same stuff he's doing at Iowa State in the NFL. It's the exact same player. I think that's going to be the exact same player with Cam Skattebo as well.
When in doubt, Dwayne, give it to 4. Yeah, give it to 4. Yeah, that's all you need to do. When in doubt, give it to Skattebo.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's also a guy that's climbing. He's up to 60 now. When I wrote the supermodel, he was at 85. So actually a bigger jump than what we just talked about, because draft picks are not linear, right? It's a logarithmic. For you guys are like, okay, nerd. It just means the drop off is much more severe, and the value between the picks earlier in the draft versus later in the draft, they become much closer. So the difference between pick 1 and 15 in the NFL draft is massive, right? The actual difference between pick 100 and 130 is really not as big. So when you look at Skattebo, like there's just a lot, Kendall. Career adjusted yards per team attempt over expected, which accounts for his strength of schedule, all these different things. 63rd percentile, a really good mark. His best receiving yards per team pass attempt, 1.52, 75th percentile. So he was a plus in the passing game. You look at his grade from Lance Zierlein, pretty good, 6.16. And you look at his career composite PFF grade, which is the other film component for running backs in the model, 75th percentile. So this is a guy that really has a strong, and it's like Thor said, very, very productive collegiate player. And that's definitely pushing him up in the model. But now, like if I update this and like I move him to, pick 60, like he's probably going to move to a supermodel rating of like 73 or 74. Right now he's sitting at 72. So his current comps that I have for him, Rashad White, Kenneth Gainwell, Jeremy McNichols. So the model does have a type. It likes guys that can catch passes. Some of those guys didn't do that well. Kenneth Gainwell came out as a 71 in the model. So Skattebo 72. Jeremy McNichols was a 70. Yeah, a guy still hanging around the league, but ultimately never turned into anything for fantasy. So when you look at it, this is a type of player where if you look at the hit rates over time, Kendall, on a player like this, 20% of them have gone on to be top 12 players in the NFL. 40% of them have been top 24 players. So I think you're still looking at him as a running back 3, hoping he could turn into a running back 2. But yes, the supermodel really loves Skattebo quite a bit more than where Mr. Thor has him.
Oh, I love it. I don't know, Thor, if he's going to make it now to your Vikings since he went out and got Jordan Mason, but I've got the jersey money on hold and until he does. Let's go to Bayshal Tootin, RB11 for you, Thor, and then Supermodel RB8. Thor, he's been one of my favorite guys that we've talked about, talking about someone rising up the rankings a little bit. King Tootin is what you called him during the NFL
King
Combine
Tootin.
because for 4.3240, I mean, it matched the time of Achan. Like, you've just really liked this guy in his pre-draft process so far.
Yeah, that's right. This dude lives life quarter mile at a time. He's Dominic Toretto with his NOS button. Like when the play starts, this guy is going 1 billion miles per hour. Sometimes you don't even know where he's going. It feels like you get that sort of breakneck kinetic sort of athleticism with him, where it's like everyone in the stadium is holding their breath. Eerily reminiscent of Isaiah Pacheco from a couple classes ago, where he had that amazing speed in a solid frame at the NFL Combine. But when you watch his tape sometimes, and he was in a bad situation, of course, with Rutgers, but it was like sometimes it was like all gas, no brakes. That you get some of that with Tootin. The vision, we need to refine that, just tweak it a little bit. The decision-making sort of paradigm that he is going out of with what he sees on the field, tweak that a little bit. And then ball security is the last frontier. Fumbled the ball 5 times last year. He had some fumbles earlier in his career. I wonder if it's between, is that a ball security thing? Is that a hands thing? Because Virginia Tech last year started to trust him a little bit less as a receiver. He has shown flashes as a receiver. Same way with the runs where he hits dingers every now and again. But you also see the strikeouts. We had seen some drops there. So again, I mean, Isaiah Pacheco, 2 years ago, he fell further than he should have because of some of these factors. Will that happen to my boy King Tootin? We'll have to find out, but very similar evaluations.
Hey, Kendall, the supermodel really likes this guy as well. Same tier as Scadaboo. Not as productive as Scadaboo was in college, but still really good. He has the 3rd highest production rating in the class, sitting at an 80 in the model. If you look at what he did at the Combine, obviously that was really big for him. That's helping his draft capital as well, which is pushing him up the board. But this is a guy that, like, when you look at his speed score rating, it's 93 rating in the model. So he's got that home run speed score of 118.3. That's in the 85th percentile since 2017. So this is a guy sitting in that tier just below, like we've talked about, Genty's all alone. Then I've got Hampton and Henderson together, and then a group of other guys that are really close to those. And then there's this next group just below with Scadabo, as well as Dylan Sampson, who we'll talk about in a minute, and King Tootin. I kind of like this. King Tootin. I think I'll roll with that, Thor. So I really like him, Kendall. He is a guy, I will say, if he surprises and gets higher draft capital than expected, it's actually going to be like to use something cool, like I feel like Thor would say, it'll be a force multiplier. Like Thor would say something cool like that, because here's the thing, the non-draft capital version of the supermodel, which doesn't include draft capital at all for running backs, Kendall, it actually has him as the 28th best running back since 2017, which is 22 spots ahead of where the supermodel has him right now. And the non-draft capital supermodel has actually been really good, a 0.70 correlation to future fantasy production, which, guess what, actually equals NFL draft capital. So it doesn't even have draft capital in the model, and it's been as strong as NFL draft capital. So Tootin is one of these guys that, like, when I look at the delta between those two numbers, the model likes him. So if he goes earlier, like, this is a guy that could climb to like 4 or 5 if he surprises by like 20 picks.
I think you nailed it, though, Thor. That is something Thor would say, 100%. So let's go over, like you said, we're finishing it up here with Dylan Sampson. Actually, a big difference between you two in this one. RB7 for the supermodel, and then Thor, for you, he is your RB12. So I kind of wanted Thor to start with you and not necessarily say what did you not like about his game, but there's obviously something that made him, fall down your ranks a little bit.
Yeah, this is a guy who on the field last year, he was more than the sum of his parts, right? I mean, he's on the smaller side. We did not see him test at the Combine. That was a bit of a head scratcher after there had been reports that he had 4.3 speed. If he ran in the 4.3s, he would have tested in Indianapolis. So, it's some of that different stuff you're curious about, but he seemed to have the vision and the feel, but then you're playing in this Mickey Mouse offense that for the running backs coming out of Tennessee, what you're scouting, you have some of the thinnest boxes that you'll ever see. We saw that with Jalen Wright's tape. So it opens up some possibilities for you. it's sort of a weird evaluation that you're then doing over the small sample, because he only took over full-time last year. So I wonder, is this due to quadruple A player, or is he someone that has the vision, the instincts, and the overall skills to go with, what's a little bit on the below average for the measurables? Will he be able to overcome that at the NFL level when he doesn't have the scheme propping him up the same way as he did at Tennessee? I'm not saying I know one way or the other. My ranking explicitly is more or less splitting the baby on this thing. I have him 12 or 13 or whatever. I'm not making the referendum high end, or I'm not making the referendum low end. Sometimes you just have to toss your hands up and see. We'll find out. That's what I'm doing with Dylan Sampson.
4.240 at the pro day, Thor.
Oh,
so how does that make you feel? That better?
Well, it wasn't in the 4.3s. Just kidding. No, I mean, that's close enough. I'm kidding, Dylan. I'm kidding.
Yeah. It's so just real quick, I'll just say he's a projection pick in the model too, right? So what's really pushing him up is the fact that Lance Zierlein likes him, and right now projected at pick 89. Okay, so we're talking about decent draft capital for running backs. We really want to get that day 2 pick at least, and he's in the range where he would be getting that right now. But I will say weakness is, it's kind of like what Thor was talking about. When you watch him, he does look really good, but overall, Kendall, his career adjusted yards per team attempt over expected, 38th percentile, not ideal. Best adjusted yards per team attempt, 43rd percentile. His best receiving yards per team pass attempt, 23rd percentile. So he's a guy that the film people do see traits that they like, but he has to grow into them. And that's okay. You can make these sort of players where you're looking at their traits thinking they can project to be even better at the next level. Obviously, play with Jalen Wright. He had to split time with him. He's a guy that went in the 4th round or 3rd round the year before in the NFL draft. So did have some competition there whenever he was playing with Mr. Jalen Wright. So the model likes him, but it is mostly based on where he's going and where he's projected to go in the draft, as well as the film grade from Lance Zierlein. The production was not very endearing at all, Kendall. 20% of the backs, though, that graded out in his range went on to have a top 12 finish in their first 3 seasons. So that's a number dynasty managers should look at. 53% went on to be top 36 finishers in their first 3 years.
I love it. Well, that was it, guys. That was the top 12 running backs from Thor. We're kind of comparing them to the rookie supermodel, and that was it for the running backs. So as always, everyone can go and check out Dwain's rookie supermodel at fantasylife.com. All of Thor's articles, a new mock draft is there as well. You can go check that out, 100% free. So make sure you go over there. While you're there, subscribe to that newsletter. We've got that 7 days a week for you. Appreciate everyone hanging out. Guys, I'll see you next week in Cabo. That's where we're going to do our next show. So we'll see you there. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us.